Welcome to the Support for Dyslexia and Other Specific Learning Difficulties talk, which is part of the Marjon Live programme. Today we are joined by Lynn Tout and Jeremy Cox from our student support team, and we also have some student ambassadors with us today. So we have Seren and Lynn, so they'll be able to talk about everything from a student perspective. I'm Sally and I'm from the student recruitment team, and I'm also here to answer any questions you may have. So the Q&A is open, so please use the functionality to ask any questions. If you'd like to make your question anonymous, you can select the anonymous button and it will come through to us. And what we'll do is we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm now going to hand over to Lynn to start the talk. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon everybody, welcome to this live. This particular one is about support for students with dyslexia or other specific learning difficulties. That's what the SDLD stands for. So that might be dyscalculia, dyspraxia, but obviously dyslexia is the one that mainly people are aware of. So as Sally was just saying there, I'm Linda Tout, I'm the inclusion coordinator and I manage the disability team in student support. And I'm joined today by one of my colleagues in the team, Jeremy Cox, who's a specialist study skills tutor. So thank you everybody for joining us. Just a very quick thing about the team. We're quite a large disability team for a small university. That's because we have a large number of undergraduate students with disability. So about 24% of our students do actually come in and register with the disability team. They're not all going to have dyslexia, but a fair proportion of them do. So the only reason I'm saying that today is really just to make you aware that we are a very experienced team. And although obviously how you experience your dyslexia or specific learning difficulty may be different, you're unique, so we'll work with you one-to-one. We do have that kind of experience behind us. So moving on to the presentation proper then, our team is known as DIAS or Disability Service. So if anybody mentions that to you, it's another acronym to get your mind around, but it doesn't matter. As long as you remember us as disability, everybody will know who you're talking about. If you approach us, probably the first people you will actually meet would be Anne and Nikki, not myself and Jeremy. So Anne and Nikki are our disability advisors and they manage that kind of first contact to us. And what I will be saying probably more than once through this presentation is to contact us now if you're concerned about getting support in place for joining us in September. This year, obviously. If you're thinking of joining next year, then it's not quite so urgent. But if you are joining us in September and you think you have dyslexia or another disability or health condition, do contact us sooner rather than later. It's really recommended that you get your support in place ready to go. Rather than join us in September, it will take a while to get that activated. And then actually you might find that you start to get behind because you haven't got support in place. So sooner rather than later. Okay, so Anne and Nikki are there as our disability advisors to sort of take you through the process of applying for support. And mostly when we talk about this, we talk about DSA, which is Disabled Students Allowances. And they're what your funding body, so normally SFE, Student Finance England, but might be Student Finance Wales or Student Finance Scotland or Ireland or elsewhere. Normally they make provision for students to have support, and Student Finance England calls this DSA. So Anne and Nikki's role really are there to support you in getting that in place, advising you on things like what kind of evidence is actually going to be satisfactory for your funding body. They also liaise with other university staff, mostly on your request, but there are some things that we do automatically as well, which I'll talk through in a moment. And just really making sure that your recommendations are put in place, the recommendations from your dyslexia report. So it's quite a myriad of things that they do, and maybe as I talk through what we do to support students with dyslexia, you'll get a clearer idea. But I think one of the things I wanted to make clear is that Nikki and Anne and lots of us actually work all through the year. We don't stop in the summer. So you can contact us now. There's no panic to contact us, I don't know, by the end of July or anything. We are there all through the summer, mainly working with prospective students, but also working with students with resits on previous work. They'll be able to tell you what the university can do to support you, link you in with any other student support that you might need. So you might need to talk to our funding advisor, Debbie, who's in our student support wider team. And really they're there just to support you to manage your studies alongside your dyslexia. So you'll see some contact details there on that slide. It's up to you how you contact us. You can contact us either by email to disability@marjon.act.uk, or you can telephone us. And obviously, because we're not on campus at the moment, you'll leave a voicemail on that telephone and we'll get back to you. Please do leave your own number very clearly when you leave your voicemail, because otherwise we have to kind of listen and re-listen to the voicemail to try to understand what the number is. But whichever way you want to contact us is how we'll get back in touch with you. So if you'd rather us email, then do let us know that. If you want us to telephone you, then let us know that. Nikki and Anne do one-to-one appointments, emails or telephone calls. Again, you can lead that. So if you would like one of the disability advisors to phone you or to video call you, or you just actually want email contact, then again, just actually let us know that. And we'll go with what you prefer to do. So moving on to this one, obviously it's the most important one really, because I'm going to talk through the sort of support that you could get in place. Now obviously it will be entirely dependent on your own needs. So what does your evidence show in terms of the support that you need? What are your particular challenges, or what are the things that work really well for you? What are the learning styles and so forth? So it will be very unique, but having said that, there are some generics, otherwise it wouldn't be worth doing this presentation. So there is some commonality, I suppose, in the support that students with dyslexia will receive. And for that, it sort of drops into two areas. So there's the university-led support and there's your funding body-led support. For the university, we have a number of inclusive ways of teaching and learning. So some of this is about, for example, lecture capture, something we call Panopto, because that's the system that manages it. So whilst some lectures will be remote this autumn, others will be face-to-face, but regardless of that, they will be recorded and you would be able to access those through your learning space with us. So that's one of our inclusive teaching and learning things. Other things fall into kind of one-to-one support. So all students are allocated a personal tutor, for instance, but we can also liaise with various staff on your behalf. We have library support, for example, which is more one-to-one than other students might receive. So if you're going to have difficulty accessing resources in the library and you need a sort of a way in, a link in with someone there, we can put you in touch with somebody in the library who'll be able to help you really to make the most of that as a resource. And exam arrangements. For those of you who've already got a dyslexia report, you'll know that often students with dyslexia will get additional time for exams, or may have some other sort of additional arrangements that they'll need in place. So we will make sure that that goes in place for you. Some students we find do prefer to opt for courses that don't have exams, but there may also be some other arrangements we'll be able to help you with if that isn't the case for your particular course. So there's probably lots of other stuff that the university leads on in terms of making sure that it's an inclusive environment for you. But then, as I say, there are a number of things that your funding body will be able to support you with. So your funding body is your access to disabled students allowance. Often, I mean, again, I'm generalising, but often with students with dyslexia or a specific learning condition and difficulty, your funding body will provide one-to-one specialist support, and that often is specialist study skills tutoring. And Jeremy's with us today because he's a specialist study skills tutor, and he's going to talk to you in a moment about what that actually is and how it can be helpful for you. So, as I say, generally, your funding body will provide you with a number of hours you can use each year during your course of study to access somebody like Jeremy, one of our tutors. They usually also provide you with a fund for equipment, software and training, which is usually detailed as to what that can be contributing towards. And that might be a contribution towards a laptop. It could be something like Sonocent software, which is an amazing piece of software, which is like a note taker and has lots of other sort of useful strategies within it. And it can be training on equipment and software as well. So it's hard to go into too much detail. Obviously, this is a summary, but really, you'll have one-to-one support if you have dyslexia. You'll have exam arrangements in place. There'll be lots of other things around the university that would be helpful for you, like recording of lectures. And then there'll also be that one-to-one support with somebody like Jeremy, specialist study skills. That's it in a nutshell. As I said, it's going to be dependent on you. So moving on to the next slide, it's really about, okay, so I think I've got dyslexia, what do I do now? And you'll either be in a position where you've got dyslexia or another specific learning difficulty, or you're not sure about it. So I just wanted to talk through really what you do next, dependent on the answers to those questions. So if you are someone who knows they have a specific learning difficulty and you've already got some evidence, then please contact us at Disability@Marjon or on the telephone number and ask if it's going to be sufficient evidence for your funding body. Most funding bodies will only accept reports and evidence that you've got that were done as an adult. So, if you had a teacher assessment, for example, when you were 14, 15, they're unlikely to accept it. So do speak to us if you're unsure. If you've already got something which is post-16 evidence, a teacher assessment or a report from a chartered educational psychologist, then you can actually go ahead and claim disabled student allowances. If you need help to do that, we're here to help you apply for that. You can carry on and apply for it independently if you want to, but we are here to support you if you do need help with that. If you don't already have evidence, when you become an enrolled student, we can offer pre-screening, which gives a probability of whether you have a specific learning difficulty. And we can offer a kind of gateway to chartered educational psychologists, and they would do a diagnostic assessment. Now, the diagnostic assessment is an expensive process. It's between something like £275, £350 for a full assessment. And we can gateway to that, and we can make a contribution to that. We always ask students also to make a contribution to that. And this year, for current students, we've been asking for a £50 contribution. So we've been paying rather most of the contribution towards your assessment, but we do ask students to make a contribution also. The £50 we're asking students currently may change. It may go up or down, or it may end up being a £50 contribution again. So it's just to bear in mind. Some students at this point, when they're thinking of going to university in September, may go ahead this summer and actually go and get their own diagnostic assessment. There's nothing to stop you doing that. But we can only gateway to pre-screening and diagnostic assessments that we pick up a fair bit of the cost for when you're an enrolled student. So there is a little bit of a time lag in terms of when we can get you on for that. Okay, I think probably next I'm going to hand over to Jeremy before I take over all of the talking here. And hopefully Jeremy is going to be able to talk through what specialist study skills actually means, what it looks like in practice, and sort of demystify it a little bit for you. So I'm going to ask Jeremy to unmute and come on the presentation, and I'll hand over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for your kind words and warm welcome. Yes, I am the same person you saw on the photo without the beard, but this is how I look now, so hopefully not too much of a surprise. Yeah, so I want to speak to you a little bit about what specialist study skills tutoring is. I'm one of 4 people who work in the specialist study skills team, along with my colleagues Karen, Heather and Ed. We're all fully qualified tutors. We've all continually do professional development and all have postgraduate certificates and other qualifications in helping people with specific learning difficulties. So there's a wealth of knowledge and resources in the team. What do we do? Well, it mostly comes down to working one-to-one with students on the work that, or the areas they feel they need help with. In the beginning, in our first meeting, we would normally do some sort of diagnostic assessment to come up with a learning plan. So we would get an idea of what each individual student requires and needs of help. And then throughout the year, in the one-to-one sessions that we have with students, we would be helping them with those specific areas to come up with strategies and interventions that can help people overcome some of the difficulties they might have with their studies. Some of the things you can see there on the slide, such as strategies for planning, organising and reviewing your work, how to break down questions, and how to use feedback to improve future work, would be some of the things that we would be doing in sessions. You might also be interested to know how it works now with lockdown and with the uncertainty of the future. Well, I've been working from home now, doing sessions such as this through Teams since March. All of the students I work with, and I work with about approximately with 30 different students, it's all gone fine. I've met 2 or 3 people who I've never actually physically met before. So meeting students for the first time through Teams has also worked really, really well. And it is probably as near as you can get to actually sitting in the same room, working with each other as you possibly can get. So there's nothing for anyone to worry about if they're not able to come into contact with people face to face, and if they have to have support through Teams or other mediums. So please don't let that worry you. It's been quite successful. And I think any of the student ambassadors who've had any support should be able to perhaps put the thumbs up for that as well. Now, there is an opportunity to ask questions. So if there is anything more specific that you wanted to know, I'll hand it back to Sally and you can post your questions and then perhaps one of us can answer them.
Thank you very much, Lynn and Jeremy. I think it's lovely to hear about all the support that we have, but I think it's even more wonderful to hear about how that transition has been for us, moving across to virtual ways of working, and that support is still there and you are still continuing to work and support students. And it's quite interesting to hear that you've met new students virtually, and that's quite funny to hear, and hopefully in the future you get to meet them face to face, which I'm sure will happen. Lynn Tout, I'm going to come across to you now for a question here. So it's just in regards, I know you said if you're joining us in September 2020 to kind of get your application started now, but it'd be great to hear kind of how long does the application process roughly take and have everything in place ready for starting at uni?
Yeah, thank you, Sally. I think it really depends on whether you've got the evidence in place now or not. If you have, then it's a question of you make your application for disabled students allowance and submit the evidence at the same time. And you'll then get something back from your funding body that says, OK, we accept that evidence that you've obviously got dyslexia. We now need you to go to a study needs assessment. And the study needs assessment, they're also being done remotely at the moment as well. So there's no delay on those. You then have the study needs assessment, and then the report from that goes to your funding body, and then your funding body decides what recommendations from the report they're going to accept. And as I said through the presentation, this is usually one-to-one tutoring. It's usually things such as equipment and software, contribution towards a laptop. So as you can see, there's a few kind of hoops that you need to jump through, and it can therefore take about 8 weeks to go through that process. So if you have the evidence now to apply for dyslexia and you're joining university in September, and this obviously applies whichever university you're joining in September, I would say make that application now. However, it is a little bit difficult if you don't have the post-16 evidence. You can't really get to that next stage. and because you're not an enrolled student, we can't provide funding for you to go through a sort of a screening process. So this is why I mentioned some prospective students do decide to get their own assessment done, carried out. But yes, so if you haven't got the evidence, it's going to take longer, I'm afraid, but probably need to figure in about 8 weeks to get the support in place. And lastly, I'll just mention one thing that I think I forgot to mention earlier, which is around university support. If you've got evidence but your funding body is being rather slow in getting support in place, we can actually provide you with interim support. So providing, you've got evidence, post-16 evidence that says you've got dyslexia and you need support, we will put some interim support in place. And then when your funding body comes back with a yes, you've got this funding, then we would normally just be able to carry on with that support, providing we're allocated for the support. But yes, we can provide some interim support if things take a lot longer than they should do. That was a very long answer to your question. Sorry, Sally.
No, that was a very good answer. It's very informative, and I think you do need to think about all the different eventualities. Obviously, again, if they're taking a little bit longer, that actually your support is still there for you, and we're not going to leave you hanging in the dark, and we are going to support you. I'm going to go across to our student ambassador, Lynn, now. So, Lynn, I know that you've kind of gone through this process that Lynn was just explaining. The other Lynn, sorry, we've got two Lynns on the call today. If you could just give us a kind of a brief timeline about like how long did it take, and was everything ready for you when you did start uni in September?
When I originally applied for my funding, I did it in the May. I started in the May, and I communicated with student support right from the beginning, and I had all my equipment set up in my flat by the end of August, beginning of September, before I went to university. So when I came to university, I had all my laptop, all my software, I had all my Sonosynth, my microphone, so it was all in place when I started.
Thank you, Lynn. That's amazing to hear. And I think it does link in again with what Lynn Tout's been saying in regards to kind of if you get your application in, let us start supporting you early on, and we'll make sure that everything's ready for you come September, if we're in a position to do so, obviously depending on if you've already got that evidence or not. Jeremy, I'm going to come across to you now for a question that's come through, because I know that you were talking about you currently have 30 odd students that you tutor. Will our students always have the same tutor?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, Lynn kindly allocates a student to us and we have a meeting with that student, but we always work on the basis of there has to be some sort of like relationship. So if a student feels for whatever reason that they would prefer to work with somebody else, then we don't take that personally. We just arrange to work with somebody else. So no, you don't have to stick to a particular tutor. If you've been allocated, you can't swap around, and none of us would really take any offence.
Just from the flip side of that as well, I mean, generally, if you want to keep working with the same tutor, you generally will. I mean, obviously, occasionally staff need to take leave, or they might be away for some reason, or you may need more support than one tutor can give you. But generally speaking, we allocate one student to one tutor, so that there's a continuity. So I think, if any student's thinking, oh, we'll turn up and they'll have a different tutor every session, that's not going to be the way it works either. But Jeremy's quite right that, actually you test that relationship out. If it doesn't work for any reason, you can be reallocated. That's not an issue at all. But generally speaking, you would probably work with the same tutor week in, week out. Yeah, so I think that's worth adding as well.
Thank you, Lynn.
If I could just add another piece on top of that.
Yeah, go for it.
I've been working for some students for 5 years. They've gone through the degree. They're now on their second year, their master's degree. So, we're there for the whole run if need be.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I think that's also really positive to hear, is that actually if you are comfortable with who your tutor is, and they can be there for that whole 3 or 4 years or however long it may be that you're at Marjon for. And I think that's really important for that relationship building side of it as well. I'm going to come across to our other student ambassador that is on the call with us. So Seren, it would be great to hear about your experiences of student support and how easy it is to get in touch with them, if it is easy, that is.
Yeah, so student support are really really visible and accessible throughout the university. Sort of, you know, if you walk around the building, it's a small uni, you tend to walk past student support at some point or the other, sort of, and they make sure to advertise them really well. So they have drop-in sessions. I think there's at least 3 a week, and you can turn up, sort of take a number, and then they'll sort of give you an appointment. And these are a really great way to get in contact with them, because I feel like sometimes just sending an email is a bit daunting, or, you know, I never want to do a phone call. So it's really easy to just go see someone in person, have a quick chat about sort of the situation, and they'll sort of offer what support you need. And similarly, my lecturers are always sort of signposting us if we need extra help or specific study skills of, you know, here's how you can get in contact, here are the different ways, here's what's on offer. So it's really easy to access, and yeah, they're very visible and friendly when you do go and see them, sort of reassuring that how they can help you out.
Thank you. Again,
I might jump in and add something there again, Sally. Sorry.
No, go for it.
No, it's really good to hear that Seren found it really accessible in that way. I was just going to add about the drop-ins, because drop-ins for disability don't happen like that remotely. Remotely, we would just offer one-to-ones, because drop-ins, we just wouldn't be able to, you know, give people confidentiality. But when we're on campus, disability team run 2 drop-ins a week, but funding run 2 drop-ins also a week. Academic advice, 2, or actually might be 3 drop-ins a week. And we also run well-being appointments as well. So the whole of student support run the drop-in service. And that's, as Seren said, very accessible. And we've been able to work around that whilst we've not been on campus, and we've been working remotely. So we do that via one-to-ones. So instead of coming to a drop-in, you email student support or disability team and you ask for a one-to-one, and we hook that up as soon as we're able to. So I'm just trying to give a kind of, you know, as we're doing it at the moment whilst we're working remotely, and what is going to be possible again in the future.
Thank you very much to Seren and Lynn for kind of sharing that. And I think, again, it's just that importance that, and highlighting again, it's just so easy to get in touch, and you can get in touch through a variety of different methods, and what kind of suits you the most. But sometimes just a quick email, can I speak to someone, and they're there and ready to help you. I'm going to come back across to our student ambassador, Lynn, because I know we've briefly mentioned about, obviously, if you wanted to get screening before potentially starting and enrolling at uni, and kind of what options there are there. So Lynn, over to you.
If you wanted to get screened before you go to university, if you go to Noakes and Hibermale Optician at Crown Hill, they will do a screening for you, and it will cost you £30.
Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that. And I think that's if you're obviously local to Plymouth, that's an option there for you. And I'm sure there's plenty of options elsewhere in the UK as well, but it's handy to know that there is one local to us. So I'm just going to kind of round off now. I think we haven't had any further questions coming in, so I just want to say a huge thank you to our presenters for joining. So Lynn and Jeremy, thank you for providing us all with plenty of information in regards to the services that you offer for people with specific learning difficulties. I think it's really informative, and it's great to see your faces, and people be able to know who they'll be contacting and who's behind those emails. And thank you to Lynn and Seren for sharing their experiences as a student, and how long it might take to get some of these things in place. And how supportive obviously student support are in helping you with your different inquiries and queries. And thank you everyone for joining us today as well. So